Hello everybody and welcome back. Alright, in today's video we're going to be finishing the set of tutorials I've been doing on basically how to make a YouTube video or how I make my YouTube videos. And in today's video we're going to be showing how I make my thumbnails. I'm just going to warn, this isn't a video showing how to use Photoshop itself. It's more going to be how I put the pieces together to make a finished thumbnail for my videos. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First things first. In today's video, we're going to be making a thumbnail for a video I haven't even made yet. Usually I make thumbnails. It's like the last thing that I do after I've already finished a video and rendered it and everything. I think it's actually best to do it at that time because usually by the time you have your video finished, you maybe might have some ideas you want to do for the thumbnail. And by the way, I'll be showing some examples of some ones that I've done. But first we have to talk about what we need for a thumbnail. So there's going to be three things mainly that we're going to need. You can see here's a Rainbow Six thumbnail that I did in October of this year. So some things you'll notice is there's a background, a main character, and then the game's logo. Those are like the three main components that you need for a thumbnail. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I make a thumbnail for another finals video because that is the next one that I'm going to be doing. So first things first, as we mentioned, the three things that we need, the logo, the character, and the background. The logo is pretty easy. Just Google whatever game. For example, if you're doing Rainbow Six, you'd Google something like Rainbow Six logo PNG. If it's like this for some reason and it's showing like the NBA finals, which obviously we don't care about, we could do the finals game logo PNG, and you can see a bunch of these different ones. Try to find one that is a real PNG. You know how sometimes like this one, for example, it's a fake PNG and you can't really download it. You might even have to go to a website to download it if you really need to. But just try to find whatever logo you can. Also, the colors don't really matter. If it's black and you want a white logo, or it's white and you want a black logo, it shouldn't matter too much because we can change that later. But also make sure it's high quality. Like some of these you can see this is 500 by 440. But other ones like this one that I just clicked on, it's really small and it's going to turn out really blurry whenever we size it up in our thumbnail. So you can see in my case, I have a folder with just a bunch of game logos that I use for my different thumbnails. And I already have this one right here, which is the finals logo. All right, next thing we're going to need is a background image. So what I recommend you do is just search like a game map or location of a game. For this video, I'm thinking System Horizon from the finals might be good, maybe. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this image right here. It's also best to just get a couple different ones just so that you have a bunch to work with. Also for something that I'll mention a bit later. So try to find at least minimum, obviously one, but if you can, maybe do a couple more. You can see my rainbow videos. We have a couple different maps like Canal, for example. For this one, we have Border. For this one, we have Villa. You get the idea. Whatever game you're doing, you can do a map for. Even something like Fortnite, you can see this was, I forgot the name. It was the mansion, Oscar's mansion or whatever for the background of that. Same with this one during the Greek season. This was the, I forgot the name of the location because this map sucked, but you get the idea. You can usually find a point of interest, a point of location for whatever game that you need to do. Okay, so we have our background, we have our logo. The final thing we need for a thumbnail is a character or a main subject. This can be easy or difficult depending on the game. In some cases, like in Rainbow, what you can do is just Google like the character PNG, for example, Bandit Rainbow Six PNG, and we'll probably find something like this, which would be good to use for a background logo. You could even try searching something like, you know, certain skins in certain games. You might have a situation where maybe all of the good ones are not, you know, a transparent PNG, or maybe even in some cases like in the finals. For example, in my last finals video, you can see this is the character that I currently used in that video. So it's a very specific skin that you can't just like Google search for. So in cases like this, what we'll have to do is cut out the character from an image, which is pretty easy to do, and I'll show you how to do that. I still recommend that if you can, to save time and, you know, your own energy and resources and blah, 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 I recommend you just Google search and try to find a skin in a game that you can use, because that's the easiest option. But I know for some people that's not always the case. So all right, so you can see this is my current character in the finals. I'm gonna try to find a good kind of pose, which in this game, obviously it'll depend on your game. If you have emotes in the game or whatever, you might be able to go through and just sort of pick whichever one you think is best. Okay, so I've gone through and I think I found a couple that I like. We have this one, And this one's one thing to keep in mind with these is, one, for most of our thumbnails, we're only really going to have the top half of the body. So if something is, in the way of the bottom half or whatever, it won't matter because we probably won't have this showing in the thumbnail anyways. Another thing, if you are taking a screenshot to cut out from a game, keep in mind that you don't want things like the UI and stuff to be in the way of the character. For example, some of these emotes, even if I wanted to use them, you can see the character goes off screen a little bit. Also, some of these are a bit too complicated. You want the character's face to be seen in the thumbnail. Like, sure, that's a good pose right there, but one, it's getting cut off by this side right here. And number two, you can't really see the face too much, so it's a bit weird looking. Okay, so now we have everything we need. We have our game logo, we have our game background, and we have our game character. So now all we need to do is open up Photoshop, go ahead and go to new file up here. And then you can see I already have a saved preset, but what you're gonna wanna do is do 1920 by 1080, resolution of 300. Basically all of these settings that you see here, you can copy. And then we're gonna go ahead and hit create. And now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna drag in my background images first, just so they're on the bottom. And then I'm also gonna drag in my game logo real quick. I might actually use the one that we just downloaded. I think that might look good. And don't worry, we're gonna move all this stuff later. Now for the character, it kind of depends. If your character is one that you downloaded from here super easily. So for example, let me go back to the Rainbow Six Bandit image. If your character is like this, you can simply drag them in and you will already basically have them cut out and it's easy and done. But like I said, in our case, we have an extra step because we have to manually cut out our character from this. So I think I'm gonna choose this one right here, maybe for the character that we use. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to file and I'm gonna go to open, and then I'm gonna open the one that I wanna use. Another thing I forgot to mention, in my case, you can see as I zoom in, it's a bit blurry. Try your best to get the character as close to the camera as you can so that they're not blurry in the screenshot that you take. In this case, there's just nothing I can do about it. It's going to be blurry, but luckily Photoshop has some things where whenever we expand this and cut this out, it will try its best to make it not as blurry as it is here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click this lock over here to unlock the layer, and then I'm going to click this little plus button to add a new layer. And then on top of this layer, I'm just going to paint it white and then move it below this layer so that the background is white. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the pen tool. You can do that just by hitting P on your keyboard. And then actually one thing that we can do before we fully finalize and go through and, try to make the points as exact as we can, one thing that we can do is we can sort of just do a rough estimate of where we want our character to be cut out from, something like this. And then I can right click, do make selection, hit OK. And then I can Control C copy this, Control V paste it. And now we can actually sort of, obviously, again, it's not cut out too good, but we can sort of see a rough estimate of how our character will look in our thumbnail. So you can see, maybe you like this, maybe you don't. If you don't like it, you can go through one of your other screenshots if you took multiple and maybe choose a different pose or a different animation or whatever. In my case, I like the way this looks, so we're gonna go ahead and go back. I'm gonna deselect all this. And then I'm going to just fine tune, go through and precision out the character, leaving no background behind. So let's go ahead and get a time lapse of that. Now, while this time lapse is going, I do want to mention a couple things. First things first, your cutout doesn't have to be exactly on the line. It's okay to go a bit over because you'll see later on we're going to add a couple things that will hide our mistakes. There's also some pieces of some clothing or some characters that you can even leave out. Like there are some characters with just absolutely crazy like hairstyles and things like that you don't really want to add. And sometimes it's okay to be a little bit rougher around the edges and not include like each individual hair strand, if that makes sense. All right, so once we have our little section cut out, you can see I did it right here. And again, keep in mind, we're not going to be showing the bottom half, so that's why I just sort of did a line straight through. Once you finish it, go ahead and link the two ends, and it will create the selection. And then we're going to right click. We're going to do make selection right here. And then you can select a feather radius. I'm just going to leave it at 1 pixel because that's how I like it. And I like anti-aliasing on. And then I'm going to hit OK. And then what we can do is if we go up here to select and we hit inverse, and then we delete, it's going to select all of the background, so you can see we're only left with the character. This way we can sort of see if we got our character outline cut out right. You can, even if you want, change the background color to something like a black color to see if you have a bunch of strands. You can see right here, for example, because the background was gray, there's a little bit of a gray outline around our character. And this is going to be okay because, like I mentioned in the time lapse, we're going to do a couple tricks to sort of hide our mistakes right here. Another thing I guess I should mention is that there are some times when a character has internal bits. For example, right here, you can see the character has these little strings with the background peeking through. Now, you can't really tell on this character. This isn't a good example to use, but one thing you can do if you do have a character like that, let me see if I have a thumbnail for an example. Okay, yeah, like this Ying right here, right? Whenever we're cutting out our outline, there's going to be these little areas in between her, like in between her shoulder and arm area and her torso, where there's like a blank space in between where the background needs to show through. So what you would do for areas like that is you would just use the pen tool again and, you know, cut out the little area, right click, make selection, and then we can delete it. And then do the same thing for the next little area. On this character, it's a bit small and a bit hard to tell, but on other characters, you'll have areas where you really do need to cut out this sort of bit. And honestly, this part might even be hidden by our thumbnail. Alright, so once we have our character, I'm going to select the layer that she's on, and I'm going to Control C to copy, and then I'm going to bring it over here. I'm actually going to delete our old like test one, and then I'm going to paste in our new character. And before I start resizing and adding effects and things like that, I'm actually going to go through and finish our background layers. So one thing you can do is you can press Control T to transform and be able to move around our different images and resize and stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of our background layers and I'm going to just resize them to where I think is good. In some cases, like for example, in this one, we don't really care about the sky. The sky isn't like the main subject. So I'm going to cut off a bit of it to leave more color in our image. And for cases like this one, this is one that I got off Reddit. You can see it's literally just a screenshot from the game. You can still see the home button icon because someone took this on a phone. And the side views right here. So we're just gonna make sure we resize to cut out all of that different stuff. Another thing I forgot to mention while we were searching for these, but I guess I'll mention now. In my case, it doesn't matter if these background images are super blurry because we're already going to be blurring them anyways. So if you find like a super low resolution background, let me see if I can find an example online. Okay, so for example, something like this is super small. It's 480 by 270. If I go ahead and just save this image and then import it into Photoshop, you can see, oh yeah, this is awful. So if we import this into Photoshop and then we expand its size, it's going to be super blurry and you might think this is awful, but one thing that we're going to do is we're going to click on the layer, our background layer, and then we're going to go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then we're going to choose a blur amount. I recommend staying between, I would do at least 2 and then maybe go up to 5 maximum. I kind of like 3 to 4-ish. So I'm going to do 3 right here. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to do that on all of my different layers just to blur the different backgrounds. And there we go. You can see these now are blurred and you can't really see the imperfections. With this cafe one, I'll even do this as just to show you the example. If we blur it, there we go. You can see you can't really tell how pixelated it is anymore. It kind of hides the pixelation. So, all right, so now that we have our background resized and finished, we're going to go ahead and I like to do my character next. Sometimes you can do the logo, but I'm just going to do the character because I think that's pretty important. And then what I like to do is I like to put my character in either the left or the right corner. Sometimes you can put the character in the middle. It sort of just depends. Sometimes as well, you might have multiple characters. For example, like in this Fortnite one, you can see we have a character on the left and the right. Same with this Rainbow Six one, you can see we have a character on the left and the right. And for example, this one right here, you can see Valkyrie, the character, is in the middle of the portrait. So it really sort of depends on where you want the character. In this case, I think she could go on either side. If I put her on the left, it'll look something like this. If I put her on the right, it'll look something like this. So in my opinion, either side works out. I actually kind of like the right side more, but I think I might go with the left. It also depends on what side you want them on, dependent on, you know, which way they're facing, as well as the background. So for example, there might be something in the background you don't want to cover. In this one, for example, like this background, I might want to put the character over to the right because I want to show off the building, or in this one right here again to the right so that you can show off the sort of ball over here. Or maybe you do want them over to the left because you want to sort of hide some of the sky and show more of the color over here. It really just depends on whatever you think is best. In a lot of my thumbnails, you can see I tend to do characters over to the right more. I just for some reason like my characters on the right side of the screen. So sometimes I have to force myself to bring a character over to the left. Or you can see like in this one, in the Fenrir one, he's actually facing like towards the right-ish. He's leaning towards the right, so he looks better to the left. Or like this Wilmai one right here, he's sort of facing front and center, so he can be on the right or the left. It really doesn't matter. Michelle right here, you can see she's facing towards the right, and therefore I put her over to the left. Again, it really just depends. I'm going to leave this character over to the left because I've had multiple videos in a row now where the character's over to the right. You see this one, right side, right side, right side. So we're gonna leave her to the left just to break the right side curse, I guess you could call it. Some things as you're resizing your character, make sure that the character takes up a large majority of the thumbnail. And this is why I say to try not to find a character that's way too blurry, because they're going to be like one of the huge main subjects that everyone sees. Although also keep in mind in things like mobile and desktop, your thumbnail is going to be really small. It's going to be like this tiny. So some of the like blurry bits you aren't going to see too well, but in some cases, like on some of my thumbnails, you can see how blurry some different faces are in different areas. At least me personally, I can. Another thing that's good to note is that some characters can sort of go off screen a little bit, or you can have parts of them go off screen. For example, Wilmai right here, you can see his shoulders sort of cut off. In this image, I forgot this character's name from X Defiant, but you can see like her hand and gun is getting cut off right here. You can see in this thumbnail, this guy's shoulder is getting, or his arm is getting cut off, and her shoulder is getting cut off right here. So my point is, characters can run off the page if you want them to. In my case, I don't think I really need that for this character, so I'm just gonna leave her a little bit just like right here. And then I'm gonna add the logo, and I'll put this in the opposite corner over here. I'm going to sort of add a little bit of a rotation and make sure that it can be seen from far away. Make sure you often zoom out so that you can still like make sure that you can read everything that you need to read, because sometimes people will put things in thumbnails where you can't really read the text for it. You can see in my videos, if you want to use them as examples, I try to keep most things as seen as possible so that you can tell what exactly is happening on screen, what exactly each words are saying. There are some cases like this one, you can see it's a little bit harder to see, it's really tiny, but that was something I sort of had to do just because of the logo that I was using. But for the most part, you want to make sure everything is readable in the thumbnail from a decent distance away. All right, and now all that's left to do is make some minor adjustments, maybe tweak some things here and there and add some effects. So the first effect I recommend you do is on your character. So I'm going to select the character layer. We're going to go to effects and we're going to go to outer glow. You can see these are my default settings right here. I recommend you copy these down and then just hit make default so that you can hit reset to default to always get to these settings. And what we can do right here with the size is we can increase and decrease the kind of outline we have on our character. You can also just change the color up here if you want, depending on what you need. I like just giving a white outline to every character that I put. This is what I mentioned before about kind of hiding some of our mistakes. The good thing about this outline is it sort of smooths out the characters, some of these more jagged edges. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our logo and we're going to add a drop shadow. These are my default settings right here, although I never keep these default. I always change them around. So if you want, you can copy these. But what we're going to do is we're going to increase the distance on this. And then we're also going to increase the size to make it sort of blend better. And then in some cases, you can even change the color from pure black to maybe more of a gray to make it lighter. And I think this looks good. If I hit OK and I kind of show and hide the drop shadow here, you can see the difference it makes. It sort of brings it off the page and makes it not as hard to see. In some cases with some logos, they already have outlines. For example, on the Minecraft logo, you can see it already has like a giant black outline, or something like Splatoon, it has multiple outlines. So in some cases you might not need to do this, but a lot of games, they just sort of keep the like pure white background. If you wanted to, you could try adding an outer glow of something like a black outline with it. In my case, I don't really like this look, but maybe it's something that you want to do. Another thing we can do is we can hold the Alt key and then we can click and drag this drop shadow onto our main character. and this will give our character the shadow itself. I actually need to edit the parameters for this though, so we can see it a bit better. You can also, I forgot to mention, you can click and drag on your screen to move the shadow around, and it'll automatically mess with all of the settings here. So maybe that's a bit easier for you to, use. All right, and as you can see, now we have a drop shadow on this character too. So our character's done, our logo's done. We need to do a little bit of touch-ups to our backgrounds. What I recommend you do, honestly, these already look amazing in my opinion, but some games sort of have more dull type backgrounds or not as vibrant backgrounds, like this one, for example. On Border, it's just a lot of tan. So one thing I recommend you do is you click on your layer and then you go to adjustments up here, and then we're going to do either hue and saturation or vibrance. I'm just going to do vibrance. And then we can increase the vibrance right here to make it pop a bit more. We can also increase the saturation if we want. And if we go back to our layers, I recommend you right click on the vibrance layer and then hit create clipping mask. And this is going to make sure that this vibrance only applies to this layer right here, because sometimes if you don't have this on create clipping mask, it'll apply to the character as well, and the game logo and other stuff that you don't want it applying to. In my case, when I switch this on and off, you can see the difference of the color that it makes, and I actually like this. It makes it a lot more vibrant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to drag this to the next background layer. I'm going to hide this background layer, and then I'm going to make sure this one is creating a clipping mask to this one, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to edit the parameters of this one until I get to something I like, and then once again I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy it, go to the next one right here, create a clipping mask, and then I'm going to edit the vibrancy of this. All right, and I think that is good. I might even add a vibrancy to my main character because you can see she has a lot of blue on her, and I think it might be better if we sort of make that pop a little bit. You never want to go too far with some of these, because you can see if I bring this up to 100%, her face is kind of turning green and it looks weird. So make sure you don't go too overboard with stuff like this. All right, and you can see it's a very subtle difference, but it increases the color on her hair and the color on this little like med pouch thing, which I think looks good. All right, and with that, I think are done with our thumbnail. If you want to add other stuff, you can. In some cases, the video title might need something else. For example, in this video right here, Stressful Rainbow Six Moments, Alibi here is holding a Four Loko because we had a joke in a video where one of our friends was saying he needed a Four Loko, so I decided to add those. In some cases like this one, X Defiant Brain Rot Moments, we have this image of like a Deku Doge dog because we were talking about brain rot memes. And there was also a bit in here where I did a voice of Deku, so you can see that one right here. You can see another one, Rainbow Six Moments But Were Weird. I added one of the blue emoji faces. Getting freaky in Rainbow Six, you can see we have Demos saying tickle me because he's getting freaky. You get the idea. You can add more stuff if you really need to. Like in this one, I can swing my sword. We were talking about a Tobuscus moment, and so I decided to add a bunch of images from Tobuscus's I can swing my sword video. You get the idea. You get the point. You can add whatever you want to your thumbnail to bring it together. This is sort of just basic stuff that you need. All right, and once you're done, I recommend you save a version of the PSD so that you can go back and change stuff later on if you need to. You can just name this whatever your video title is. And then whenever you want to save an image to actually use on YouTube, what you can do is once again go to the save image like area, and then we're going to save this as a JPEG. And the reason you save this as a JPEG instead of a PNG, because yes, a PNG is higher quality, but YouTube has a maximum of, I think it's 2 megabytes that you can upload for a thumbnail. All right, yeah, so you can see file is bigger than 2 megabytes. So in some cases, whenever you save it as a PNG, it's a bit too high quality for YouTube. So I recommend you just save this as a JPEG. And then the reason in our case, you can see we have 3 different background layers. I recommend you make 3 different thumbnails. They can be as minor or major changes as you want. You can see in my thumbnails, some of these people might not even know that I do, is I'll do either 1 or 2 thumbnails for the finals video. We had 3 right here with 3 different backgrounds. For this one, you can see right here, I changed the logo around and I moved the birds. In a lot of cases, what I usually do is I just change the background, around to see which one's better. But the reason I say you should do this is because on YouTube, you can do these things called thumbnail tests. So you can set multiple thumbnails. You can set up to 3 thumbnails and upload them to YouTube, and YouTube will cycle through them in people's recommendations list. And then it will tell you whichever one people preferred more, and then you can set it to that one. You can see this current video that I last uploaded is still running a test. And it seems like people prefer this one, which is funny because the thumbnail number 2 was actually the one that I made first. Thought people would like this one more, but that's the thing is sometimes what you like, other people won't like. Some instances like this one, the finals right here, this is the thumbnail that people like the most. Even though in my opinion, I like this thumbnail that I made for it the most, but like I said, people liked this one more. So it really just depends, and that's why I recommend you make multiple, at maximum 3, at least maybe 2. Or in some cases in mine, like this one right here, I knew exactly what I wanted for the thumbnail. I didn't want to change anything about it, so I just had the one thumbnail and that's it. But yeah, I think that's gonna be the end of this video. If you liked it and you found it useful, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. This is not my main channel, so I don't check the comments a lot, but if you have a question or anything, I might get around to it and respond to you. And with all that out of the way, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye everybody.